So I've just signed up to take an FAA drone license test, and this has been kind of a whole process, so I figured maybe try and get a video out of the process. I have been trying to figure this out for quite a while, ever since I realized that a drone used for commercial purposes, including for YouTube, like myself, has to be registered with the FAA and operated by a licensed unmanned aerial vehicle pilot. So there are a bunch of hoops to jump through for this, and information about it is a little inconsistent, honestly. So the process is kind of complicated, and I've been puzzling my way through it for a couple months now. Currently, I'm at about step 3 of 10 steps on my to-do list. So I went on the FAA website, I got an FTN number. I have already forgotten what that stands for, but I have the number. I've started studying some of the knowledge material and the example tests, and I have scheduled a test. The next few steps are taking the test, hopefully passing, completing some more paperwork, waiting for a background check to come through, getting a temporary certificate, getting my state registration, because that is a separate step, getting a permanent drone operator certificate, getting insurance, which I think actually has to come before the state registration, and then I also have to renew this every couple years. So maybe that's more or less than 10 steps, but approximately a 10-step process here. And again, I'm at step 3. So I have this whole binder of information. I've got study guides, charts, contact information, scheduling information, notes from going through videos about this. One video that I found really helpful was Tony Northrup's. I will throw a link to that down in the description. His video is from 2017, so it's still kind of relevant for a lot of the process, but some of the things have changed. In particular, how you schedule the exam. Back in 2017, people still used the phone for stuff. There was a phone number, a 1-800 number that he recommended calling for PSI testing. That phone number in some of the old documentation just goes to a spam line now. They try to sell you a life alert thing for seniors. I found another phone number for the testing agency. I called them up and they seemed very mystified about, why am I calling them? Who uses the phone anymore? Why don't I use their website? So I did go on their website. I had to go through a bunch of extra hoops that aren't mentioned in some of the old material that I found. So I had to get an authenticator app and prove my identity and sign up for a bunch of stuff online. Anyway, that's a whole process that you can probably figure out yourself. I will throw links to the PSI testing website that I used down in the description as well. Basically, they're kind of a test aggregator that controls a bunch of FAA testing centers around the US, or serves as a middleman between the FAA and the actual testing center. I don't quite know what PSI does other than they take $175 of my money. Anyway, I do have a test scheduled next week, so hopefully I will pass that. I'm going to spend the next week doing more studying. Drone license studying, the knowledge test is kind of all over the place. It includes everything from weather, air traffic control, flight zones, aircraft radio. This radio here... Fluff tried to just jump up and join me and immediately fell off. This radio here is not related to this video, but it will supposedly do airband, so I guess it's somewhat related because I can listen to air traffic on here. A lot of the knowledge stuff is very generic for any pilots and not necessarily applicable to drones. Like, I don't really need to know that there's a certain airspace 10,000 feet up because my drone will never make it 10,000 feet up. I don't necessarily need to know all the weather details, although that stuff can be interesting and it can be somewhat useful if you want to worry about icing conditions, visibility conditions, things like that. And again, Tony Northrup's video goes into intense detail on all of those things, and he shows some example questions and explains how to get those right and what kinds of things that the FAA is looking for from people taking the drone knowledge test. Yeah, it's basically just a bunch of legal hoops to jump through. It keeps the lawyers happy, it keeps the government happy, and the idea is that it keeps you from crashing your drone into an aircraft or into people on the ground. That's kind of the main goal of getting a license. Now, should you as a YouTuber or possibly commercial drone owner get a license? Yes, I would recommend it. Not only are you staying legal, staying out of government trouble, but it can actually get you some interesting side benefits. For example, when I mentioned in a prior video that I didn't want to do anything illegal with a drone, I almost immediately got a message from a private pilot, our friend Andy, who said, "Hey, I'm really glad that you're being legal with your drone. Do you want to come for a flight in my plane?" I said, "Sure, cool." It was really cool to have that opportunity again. Thank you again, Andy. I will throw a link to his YouTube channel down in the description too. But he is one of the people who is very happy with you having a drone license, much like Amateur radio operators are very happy with you having a proper radio license before you use something like this amateur radio over here. This is a lot of information to take in, and a lot of these questions on the practice test seem to be phrased in, they're almost like trick questions. Like they'll ask about a high density altitude or a low density altitude. They're not talking about high density and low density air. They're talking about a high altitude and a low altitude. That's very confusing. I'm going to have to remember that one. Maybe I'm just getting tired from reading through all this stuff, but some of it just doesn't make any sense. These aeronautical charts are also super confusing. I'm kind of a map nerd myself. I actually went to graduate school for GIS mapping, and I'm very familiar with topographic maps, nautical charts. These aeronautical charts, it's like they took an already information-dense topographic map and they just said, well, let's see how much more information we can pack in here. How confusing can we possibly make this? Maybe an experienced pilot could actually use this in the air, but I think these are more something you have to sit down ahead of time and puzzle over and figure out exactly what you're doing. Now, I'm pretty sure I'll pass the test. You'll only need to get 70% of questions correct, so they'll let you fly a drone around with just a C- grade, essentially, but there is still quite a bit of stuff to take in and try to memorize. Now, it doesn't help that half of the training documents that used to be on the FAA website have been deleted or moved. I guess I can thank Elon Musk for that. All right, it's morning of the test day, and I stayed up too late last night, but at least I got some studying done, and I think I have all the prep done that I'm going to get done. I'm not even awake yet. I think I am as prepared as I'm going to be, although I still don't understand how airspace works. And I started wondering halfway through this, as I struggled with half of the FAA website being deleted, is there even going to be an FAA when I get this license? Will there be drone test enforcement? Will it just be anarchy? Who knows? The way the government's going, they're axing programs left and right, so maybe there won't be any laws in the future. You know, it's still a good idea to get this. It's a good safety practice to know the rules, or what the rules were when we had rules. So I'm gonna shut up now, drink some caffeine, and go take this test. I obviously can't take the camera into the test. I can't even take my phone or anything more complicated than a 4-function calculator. So yeah, we will come back to this after I'm done. All right, and I passed, so 92%, not bad. There were definitely some pretty difficult questions in there, and there were a few that just did not show up on any of the practice or study material that I got. I went through the pilot manual, I went through the FAA materials, I went through some third-party study materials, and there were definitely some questions that just I hadn't encountered anywhere about rules and regulations that I hadn't seen anywhere. So I'm not quite sure if the materials I had were just old. They didn't let me keep any of my notes, and they didn't say specifically which questions I missed, but they did give me a list of 5 questions or 5 study areas that I need to study, and they said that those could apply to multiple questions. So anyway, it looks like I missed about 5 out of 60 questions, which isn't bad. So definitely Donnie is going to help with this video, or at least just leap onto the camera. So it looks like the stuff I missed was regarding the load effects from banked turns. They want to know what degree, how steep of a bank does it start to show a significant difference, and that was pretty vague. They had a chart showing a curve and the different bank angles, and I just kind of guessed on that one. I also missed a couple things about a declaration of compliance, which I hadn't really come across in the study materials. It was a little bit vague. There was also a question relating to pressure altitude versus density altitude, which maybe I saw in the study material, but that wasn't super clear either. And then surprisingly, I missed one about radio frequencies, which is weird because I thought I was pretty good at the radio stuff, and I thought I had all of the different CTAF and ASOS and Unicom and Multicom stuff figured out, but I have been playing around with airband radios recently. I got a handheld that will supposedly do VHF AM, so aircraft band, and then I got a mobile radio in my car which will also do VHF AM. They're both terrible. I can't hear a thing from any of the airports around me. I think VHF AM is just such a weird, outdated frequency and modulation scheme that it works great in the air, but as soon as you have a tree anywhere near you, the coverage just vanishes, so you can't really hear it on the ground very well unless you live right at the airport. So kind of useless for me on the ground as a drone user. I'm never going to be able to hear any aircraft unless they're directly overhead. I'm never going to be able to hear airport operations unless I'm right next to the airport. Or at least that's been my experience just driving around, listening to some of these radios, even with specific airband antennas. They pick up absolutely nothing on the ground. I was just about to log into the FAA's website to check the status of this, and it looks like I now have my temporary certificate, so that's a big step. Alright, so then I had to register my drone on a different FAA website. Then I have to dig through the state laws because I think insurance is required, but they don't give you a straightforward answer. I'm pretty sure all of this garbage exists just to keep lawyers employed. I'm also not 100% sure how to buy drone insurance. Insurance always seems a little scammy, and a lot of these companies seem more scammy. So yeah, especially anything with AI in the name, that just shouts scam to me. And even $25 a month, that seems like quite a bit. Now, Wisconsin is another story. They're always a little more lax when it comes to having laws and whatnot, but it looks like I could fly the drone in Wisconsin over at Sandland without having any special additional hoops to jump through. Now, I don't fly this thing in Minnesota all that often, so it doesn't really make sense to pay $25 a month or hundreds of dollars a year for insurance on the thing. I've got a trip to Alaska planned in the nearish future, so I'd like to use the thing up there, and Alaska doesn't seem to have any specific laws about drones other than don't crash it into a bear. So I might just skip the state registration here in Minnesota and just not use it in Minnesota. One thing I learned while going through the FAA training is that I can't legally fly this near my house. I live under Class D airspace because I'm near a regional airport, and the tower at that airport operates until 10 p.m., which is after twilight. So unless I get a waiver 60 days ahead of time or put navigation lights on this thing, I can't fly it near my house. Now, yes, I could use it out in greater Minnesota. I could use it along the Mississippi River. I could use it in some other areas. But I will have to think very carefully about that because there's now a huge financial burden to sending up this little drone. Almost as much as the drone itself costs. If I want to use this, I have to have a whole year's worth of insurance. I can't just get 5 minutes worth of insurance from some of those scammy looking websites because those are not acceptable to the Minnesota Department of Transportation. It has to be a 1-year insurance certificate. So basically, as soon as I want to fly this in Minnesota, I have to go out and pay for a year of insurance. So until my channel gets big enough to afford frivolous stuff like that, I might just not fly it in Minnesota. If any of you know of an affordable Minnesota drone insurance program that meets state requirements and doesn't cost hundreds of dollars a year, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know about that. I would like to be able to fly my drone in Minnesota. I just can't afford it right now. Minnesota also has a state drone licensing fee, which is more than the federal one. Plus, there's a commercial operator license, which it's not really clear if I need that. It seems to be aimed more at regular commercial operators who rent out drones or provide drones for a fee to the public. For somebody using it as part of a business like mine, part of a YouTube channel, it's not really clear if I need that license. Plus, Minnesota has this annoying thing where they want you to pay sales tax on your drone or prove that you paid sales tax when you bought it. They do this with boats too. When you buy a boat in Minnesota, they charge you sales tax, again, unless you have your receipts for the boat or unless you bought it in Wisconsin. I love living in Minnesota, but they do have some obnoxious laws like that where they just nickel and dime you to death with junk fees. I'm sure everyone's completely tired of looking at me babbling away in my office, so here are some actual drone shots. Now that I'm legal to fly with my temporary certificate, I can operate legally as a Part 107 drone pilot in places like Wisconsin. So here we are out at Sandland. This is my friend's off-grid property where we dig our tunnels. I parked the old Minnesota Zoo monorail, and we're building the geodesic radome that we got from an old NATO base in Canada a year or two ago. This is a great reason to have a drone because I can fly around Sandland, show off some of the stuff we're building, show our progress, show the changing seasons, just get a nice overhead view of the property and really cool views of some of the stuff we're working on out here. So this is exactly why I like having a drone. This is exactly the kind of drone footage that I like to use in the channel. And this is why it was worth getting a Part 107 license to be able to do this legally. And if you're going through the Part 107 licensing yourself, you've probably figured out a lot of the things that I experienced, and you've probably found a lot of the same resources. But again, I will throw the resources I used down in links in the description, and I'll try to mention some of the pitfalls or stumbling blocks that I came across, some of the same things that I mentioned in the video here. I'll put those in the description as well. If anyone has ideas for drone shots that I can do for things around Sandland or other drone-related projects, let me know down in the comments, and maybe some of that will show up in future videos. Thank you to everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.